And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm very pleased to have in the studio with me Charles Sauer. He's a libertarian and economist. He's president of the Market Institute. MarketInstitute.org is the website. And you can tweet him at Market Institute, just like it sounds, right, Charles?
Yep, just like it sounds.
Yeah, so welcome to the program. Glad to have you with us. Let me point that mic a little closer to your mouth. So let's talk about libertarianism.
All right.
In fact, let's talk about actually the larger economic philosophy.
Yep.
Adam Smith, David Ricardo, your classical economists, particularly if you go back and read Theory of Moral Sentiments as opposed to Wealth of Nations, which is a little more, it's actually a lot more specific about policy. Classical economics seems to be demand-driven. You know, that when people buy things, that creates demand for things, and then entrepreneurs step in and fill that.
Yep.
And yet, since Reagan's time, and arguably Milton Friedman in the 1940s out of the Chicago School of Economics, we've had this weird supply side thing. You know, if you make it, people will come. And I get it. If you invent something really cool like an iPhone, people are going to want to buy it. But that's more the anomaly than the rule, is it not?
I actually, that's part of, I think, where libertarians, and not as much libertarians, maybe there's another section here that's the Austrian school of thought on economics. And Mises,
yeah.
Karl Menger. The difference is objective versus subjective value. So Adam Smith et al. Believe in objective value. So there is no whatever labor went into it and whatever things went into making a product, there is a objective value to that product. And the Austrians have a theory that it's an active man that values something. And so, you can see this on eBay. Somebody puts a good up for $2 and then people bid it up. Well, at the end, a widget might go for 3 times what you would pay for it, but somebody else values it at that 3 times number. So I see.
In other words, value is what people will pay for something.
Value is what people will pay for something. But the classical economic theory is based on objective value. And so basically the major difference is when you get into subjective value or what people will pay for something, the economy acts differently. And so that's the Reagan school, the Chicago school, and that's where the supply-siders came in.
That's interesting. I've never heard that explained that way, and I'm gonna have to process that a little bit. Because I've read Adam Smith,
yeah,
and I've read David Ricardo, and in fact I've written books about Adam Smith and David Ricardo, and I don't recall any specific objective value as a defining value coming out of Wealth of Nations or Theory of Moral Sentiments. Smith's comment that, a product that the wealth of nations is the merger of raw materials plus human labor. He talks about how a tree limb in the forest has no intrinsic value, but if you apply human labor to it, it now becomes an axe handle, and now that has value, and that value becomes part of the wealth of the nation because it's value within the nation. What's wrong with that?
I mean, well, that's the deal. That's the labor that goes into it. But the fact is that where the profit comes in is where you get this drive to come in and make a market better. Because if you just have somebody who makes an axe and you only have objective value where the labor and the metal that go into the axe is what the price is at the end, then you only have one axe. But if you have different values, maybe you have somebody that has a better craftsman, and so the labor is worth more. Somebody values that more. You have a different dynamic to the competition.
No, I don't disagree, but I don't recall Ricardo or Smith ever talking about how that was wrong. I would think that they would agree with you.
They weren't fighting against it. They were laying down a premise for economics, and if you move past their value hypothesis and move on past that, then what you have is a dynamic that all economists agree on. But if you go back to the beginning, which is where people value things, then you move forward in a different way, where that beginning levels of competition and where my belief normally is on economics is what the motivations are for people in the first place to move. And that's to create a product that has better value for people.
But if we're defining value as price, which is kind of thin ice, isn't it?
That's thin ice. I mean, one way to talk about this is profit. If you have more profit in a good,
that's value from the point of view of the producer. That's not value from the point of view of the consumer or society.
Correct, but I mean that's the competition here starts with the producer, and that's the supply side part of this.
But that's the magic word, is competition.
Yeah.
And you know what Senator Sherman of Ohio tried to do back in 1883 was make competition actually happen. I mean, during the Gilded Age, you had the John Rockefeller, and there's just been some brilliant biographies of him that just make your skin crawl.
Yep.
What he was doing was
he did a great job of using government to control competition.
Well, not just government. He was cutting deals with the railroads, which had become monopolies. Jay Gould and his buddies, and John Rockefeller and Jay Gould got together and said, okay, we'll haul John Rockefeller's kerosene for 5 cents a ton or whatever. Yep. But if Joe Blow wants his kerosene hauled, it's going to cost him 8 cents a ton, or 80 cents, whatever it may be. And that kind of collusion created, ran literally thousands of businesses, both in the railroad and the oil business, and then Carnegie got into it, and it was the steel and everything else, ran them all out of business. So Senator Sherman came along and said, wait a minute, these trusts are anti-competitive, and for an economy to function well, you have to have competition. So your value/price equation is a function of scarcity at a certain level. In other words, if you have only one provider, for example, here in the right now, we have this show. We're sending this show out on, it's going to the satellite in Denver. It's going up on Sirius XM. It's going up on Dish and Direct. We're feeding YouTube. So yep. we're pumping a bunch of electrons out of this studio. We've got 4 different Comcast, what do you call them, routers, or whatever, lines that we pay, hundreds of dollars a month for. Yep. Or more. I'm not the guy who writes the checks, and if I was in France right now, I'd be paying probably 1/5 of what I'm paying here, number one. And number two, we're having a hell of a time. Comcast is charging us for 100 MIPS down and 20 MIPS up on each one of those 4 lines. And on an average day, each one of those lines is running 5 MIPS up. We call them up and complain, and they basically blow us off because they have no competition. It's the only service that comes into this building, the only company that's available in this part of D.C. So, when Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act in '83, we saw these huge monopolies form. I would think that if you're a fan of competition and you think that value is a function of what people will pay for it, that if you can increase the availability of products by increasing competition, by breaking up these big monopolies, that would be something that you would celebrate.
Well, first off, there is competition. You can come over to my building in Virginia, and we would be happy to have you. It would be a shorter commute for me to come here. But there is competition. You have to vote with your feet. You like it here because it's a great spot for you. And so you've decided to walk into that monopoly. And if we go back to Rockefeller, what's really interesting about him is that no matter how much he tried to create a monopoly, he never could. And he worked hard. He worked very hard to maintain a monopoly and buy everybody that went into business. People would come into business
until 1907.
Well, it wasn't a monopoly that whole time. We had people in Europe and Russia. People in Russia started competing with him, but there was several U.S. manufacturers. One guy in particular, I can't think of his name right now, but actually was able to get a pipeline out to the coast, and he had to do some maneuvers just to get around Rockefeller's maneuvering of government to help stop him. And that's where Rockefeller was this. He was a genius at working government in his favor. But no matter how he worked the railroads or how he worked the government policy, somebody was always out there ready to compete with him. And for me, that's the story of competition.
So how does somebody compete with Comcast in my building?
Well, they try to sell you to come to Virginia. They try to sell you to come to other places.
The way it's done in France, and I believe all of the European countries, but I know France because the New York Times did a long story about it, which the way it's done in France, by the way, the way it used to be in the United States, yep, with our telephone services back when we used to use dial-up services to get the internet, was that over your telephone line, you could use any ISP. If you had AT&T's telephone service, you didn't have to use AT&T as an ISP. It could be AOL, it could be CompuServe. I mean, we're talking the 80s now and the early 90s. Or it could be, I lived in Vermont. There was a phone company, SauerNet. And even though Verizon provided the copper coming into our house, which was the first studio for this show, and we wanted to have 10 incoming phone lines, SauerNet was able to provide them to us, those 10 lines. Comcast brought the copper in, but SauerNet provided us with everything else for $25 per line per month. And the service was great because this was a small, locally owned company. And the guy who did the repair work lived four doors down from us. I mean, literally, I'd call him up and he'd walk over and fix things. So it used to be, and you know, they've managed to make that, to blow those laws out of the water that said that, you know, in France, if you've got, regardless of which ISP brings the copper into your house, there's over 100 different companies you could buy your internet service from.
Yeah, so you don't value the investment of the company that went to bring the copper into your house?
They get paid the value of that copper plus a small premium to account for profit.
They get paid
but they don't have a monopoly.
They get paid what would be the objective value of that copper, and the objective value is set by government.
Yes.
That makes absolutely no sense. That is not a market. That is broken down. Well, first off,
it works for consumers. It may not work for Comcast, but it works for the consumers of France.
It works for
$28 a month in France. You can get 125 channels of cable television. You get free telephone service anywhere in Europe, and you get 100 MB download internet service, which is faster than most people in America have, unless they're buying commercial service. And that's, you know, less than $30 a month.
And yet we still have better TV and radio coming out of the U.S. than,
no, we don't.
Than all of that. I happen to disagree with you. I've watched a lot of different European shows. I've watched the movies.
Go to Europe and check it. Oh, you mean better quality, better production values.
Better quality, better production value. I mean,
that's a function of the size of the marketplace.
No, that's a function of the profit that the people can make when you're doing it in America.
No, these are not people who are producing programming. These are people who are delivering electrons, who are delivering, you know, packets of data over the internet.
Well, that's where we see when they see value of where to go. I mean, you're right. You're not when the producers see value of where to build infrastructure, and people see value in being able to get into people's houses. That's where the investment happens.
I think the key here is that the French view the internet structure, the infrastructure, the copper or fiber, as the case may be, as part of the commons, essentially. And if you're the guy who owns part of the commons, you're entitled to absolutely recoup your investment. You're entitled to make a small but reasonable profit on it.
Reasonable as set by
the government, as set by the people.
The average age of the Capitol Hill staffer is a 28-year-old. They aren't married. They don't own a house. They've never run a business. And so the average
they're not writing laws either.
They are writing laws. All you have to do, I'll walk you around Capitol Hill so that nobody runs you off as press. But the average age of the Capitol Hill staffer is an age that they just don't have the experience. But they're going to set the profit for this mega corporation who's investing billions of dollars?
Sure, the corporation says, okay, we invested $1.3 billion. We're going to amortize that over a decade. We would like to get 1/10 of $1.3 billion per year back. Plus, we would like a 5 or 10% profit, and you negotiate that with the people, and then and then they can charge. I mean, every single whatever company, SauerNet used to pay Verizon to use their copper to get into my house.
Well, to flip it to the other side of this argument, that's what's going on with healthcare. What you're saying right now is happening with healthcare. My friend that lives a couple of miles away from me just got his increase. I'm destined to get mine in the next week or two. I'm going to get 2 times, but the government is...
Let me interrupt you if I may. Not because I'm trying to interrupt you, but because the music is playing in my ear. Can you stick around for a little while?
I can.
Let's continue this conversation on the air. We'll be right back. Charles Sauer is with us. He's Libertarian president of the Market Institute.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
His website is marketinstitute.org. We'll be right back. And welcome back. So, Charles, you were saying, I'm sorry, I interrupted you mid-sentence.
So the government, when Obamacare passed, the government has the ability to negotiate the prices. So Blue Cross and Blue Shield says that they want to make X amount of money. The government has the ability to negotiate their pricing. However, my prices are still going to double in a month. The only way to actually have good pricing or pricing that makes sense is to let the competition happen. So I can go to the other side of you and show how it increases, but the real solution is competition.
So then why is it that Republicans and even libertarians are opposed to a public option, to Medicare being allowed to compete with for-profit health insurance?
I guess I don't know about the public option ever being proposed exactly that way.
Hillary Clinton is proposing it right now.
Except for every time that we see where we've seen the public option in the past is when we see businesses being able to hire prisons to put up walls for them. We see prisons undercharging for the labor and putting local businesses out. So if you want to, what happened with Rockefeller, but to have it as an unaccountable 28-year-old bureaucrat making that decision, then maybe that sounds like
I think a better
idea.
comparison might be Social Security versus a 401k. Don't you think?
I don't know. You're gonna have to take that one a little further with me.
Well, you know, if I intend to retire modestly, you know, I might be able to do that on Social Security. If I want to have a more substantial retirement, then I spend a lot of my working life trying to shovel money into a 401k. I mean, you know, it's arguably I mean, this is why Reagan started back in the day. They were called IRAs in the 80s. Yeah. Why they changed the tax code to allow this was the vision, the Reagan vision, and they were pretty upfront about it, was to ultimately eliminate the need for Social Security so that they could privatize it or destroy it, because they thought of it as socialism. And this was going to demonstrate that the free market could beat socialism. But, you know, fewer than half of Americans have a 401k. Fewer than half of Americans even own a single stock. So it's, you know, it's kind of useful to have a government that works for you, isn't it?
So you don't want a private option in Social Security, but you would want a public option.
Well, you have
in
a private
Medicare.
Option. It's called the marketplace.
Well, no, they're already
go to
stealing.
Fidelity or Charles Schwab or whatever you want.
The government's already stealing my money to put it in Social Security. I'm actually not pro privatizing Social Security. I think if you privatize Social Security, you're giving a bunch of disinterested investors a spot into the market. So what you end up with is the cronies figuring out who's going to invest that money in Washington, D.C., instead of actually interested investors, which are 401k owners. So I am pro getting rid of Social Security.
I just translated that in my head into you're not in favor of the big banks controlling Social Security. Is that what you were saying, basically?
I am.
There's like 5 or 6 big banks, and they would end up with most of the business.
Correct.
Okay, and so and your objection to that would be that there's not actual competition because it's functionally a monopoly. Whatever one bank does, they all do, just like the airlines do. Does that mean we should break up the big banks? Are you calling for government intervention?
My problem with it is that it's a disinterested investor. So when you're investing your own money in a 401k, you are looking at how it gets invested. But when you look at privatizing Social Security, you look at disinterested investors. You're taking my money from me right now, and right now you're just turning it into an IOU so that you can build Stovall, a JS-22 that a lot of people say isn't needed, or build other government goods that some others might disagree with. But Social Security should be either there or not.
We got it. We're hitting a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Charles is still here with me. We've been talking also about Social Security and whether Social Security and 401ks are analogous to this. What is the commons? What is the, what is the public option?
And what's the libertarian solution to that? I mean, because there's, as I said, the privatizing Social Security isn't actually the libertarian solution. The libertarian solution is to get rid of Social Security. Now, or you could, at the very least, you could actually just turn it into a welfare program. So I think that, as we've talked about before off the air, so that it's actually more like an insurance for somebody who doesn't save or doesn't have enough money.
In fact, it's called the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Program. I mean, or that one piece of it, and the other part,
there is a half of Social Security that is an insurance program. The other half is this mandatory savings for retirement, and
no, that's poverty insurance. When that was passed, one of the leading causes of death among people over 65 in the United States in 1935 was cold in the winter, heat in the summer. I mean, people were dying from poverty.
It's not insurance because Warren Buffett still gets it, Jobs still gets it, and he doesn't need it. It would be insurance if the left would let the right do what they would like to do, and that's turn it into a welfare program. But that's the fight on Capitol Hill.
But once you turn something into a welfare program, Republicans start cutting it to shreds.
Well, that but is the big deal. It proves that what you said about it being insurance is incorrect, right? Because if it was insurance, then it would be a welfare program because it would just go to the people that need it.
No, but we all pay into this, and so I mean, if you're going to ask Warren Buffett to pay into Social Security, he should.
We don't actually pay into it. It's a pyramid scheme. What I'm doing is
paying. A pyramid scheme.
I'm paying for the retirees right now. In 2019, I'm going to still be paying for retirees right now, but then my daughters, 5, 3, and 1, are still going to be paying for that.
Yeah, interesting conversation. Charles Sauer, economist, president of the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. Charles, thank you for dropping by.
Thank you.
Good luck. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls right after this. It's 28 minutes past the hour.